For a lot of us, FileMaker data is mostly a historical record of something that has happened, right? What if our data could tell us about what's going to happen? Let me introduce you to a new script step in FileMaker 2025. We now have configure regression model and its companion function, predict from model. These are so new, in fact, that there's no documentation yet. But not to worry, I will talk us through it. What is a regression model? Well, it's about teaching an algorithm to understand the relationship between an independent value and a target value. Well, great. How could I use something like that to predict a result? Well, here's one way. Companies like Strava and Nike have collected data on runners for years. If you plot enough of these data points, you can accurately predict the average pace for nearly any distance. Here's another way, often referred to as a binary tree. In data science, these are called decision trees. At every split, some kind of condition gets evaluated, and the point of these is to continue splitting on those conditions until all the possible outcomes are run to ground. When we train a regression model in FileMaker, we'll create hundreds or even thousands of these trees to build something called a random forest. A random forest life begins with a set of training data. The records are randomly split. Typically, it's an 80-20 split, 80 for training, 20% for testing. Each record gets passed through its own decision tree. In each tree, a random subset of features gets evaluated, and something called information gain is calculated. There's some pretty elaborate math out there on the interwebs for those interested. Eric, who is not here, so that joke is not going to land at all. All right. So at the end of this process, outcomes from all the trees are averaged. And we can use the net information gain to predict target value. Well, Brian, that sounds fascinating. What does it look like in code? So I have two examples ready for you today. The first example is an App Store review model that I trained that uses a text embedding in order to predict a star rating, 1 through 5 star rating. The second example is going to be a student model, and we'll use that to predict a student's GPA. So, hop over here. So, in the interest of time, I've created the embeddings and trained the model already, but you're not missing much, so don't worry about that. The only thing you're really missing is waiting on a momentary status bar, so I won't bore you with that. So, we've got a models table here. I've got two models, and I have the container where these model files reside. Notice the .fm reg extension. And so this file is the output from the configure regression model step. So let's have a look at that. So here we've got a bunch of commented out stuff that doesn't matter for this discussion. The configure regression model step has lots of parameters. The first one is action. We've got 4 options here. We can train a model, we can save it, load it, or unload it. These last 3 are boring compared to the training part, and that's what we're talking about today, so I've selected train model. The model name, don't overcomplicate this. This is simply a text representation for the model itself. But it's important, we need it, because it's what we're going to pass. It's one of the parameters that we're going to pass to the predict from model function later on, so got to have that. The algorithm, you can have any algorithm you want as long as it's random forest. Training vectors. So for each training record, this is the vector embedding result. Training target is the value that we want to associate with that embedding. And then later on, it's the value that we're going to predict. Now, this value's got to be a number, so that's important to remember. The skip empty or invalid, not sure about this. There's no documentation yet, but my guess is that you should probably just leave this option on unless you've got a really good reason to turn it off. The reason, I think, is because when you get into training larger and larger models, you're probably talking about hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of records. And this takes a long time. You don't want that process interrupted 80% of the way through after you've watched a babysit a status bar for 3 or 4 hours. You don't want it to stop and then have to restart that. So that's my guess as to what that feature is about. So I would go ahead and leave it on. And then our final parameter here is save model to. This is just a destination. It can be a variable or a container. And this is the destination for the model file that's going to get created, which is this guy right here. So I'm going to break back out to our data here real quick for our reviews. So this is just, I trained it on 300-ish, 320 reviews. Got the text of the review and the rating, and then the text was used to create these embeddings. If you need a reminder or haven't ever dealt with the insert vector embeddings function, I'll give you an example of what that looks like. This is what an embedding looks like. It is a JSON array of numbers. That's all it is. Just lots and lots of numbers. And so this is how all these numbers work together to encode. Oops, let me hop over here. These values are used to encode semantic meaning, and it's how large general purpose models like ChatGPT work, right? So that's a vector embedding. We hop back over to our test data. Yeah, so now we're over in our test data, and we're going to go ahead and predict a rating. So we've got a user Nancy here says the app crashes at least once every session. So fantastic. So we'll take her review, we'll create a vector embedding out of that, pass that to the predict from model, and we can predict that Nancy hates our app. So, exactly. Oh, I don't want to go there yet. Our user Avery likes the app but thinks it could be better, so that's fair. We'll take her review, create a vector embedding out of that, pass that to our model, and net a 3.2 star rating. So that's not bad. That's fair. Stan, super fan, loves the app, thinks it's great, loves the itinerary sharing feature. So he's pretty emphatic about this, which is great. We embed that, send it to the model, and we bagged a 4.8 star rating. So thank you, Stan. Appreciate it. So as you can see, text embeddings, training on a text embedding is pretty straightforward, right? It's just a text field. But let's try something a little more interesting. Let me hop over to So here, instead of creating a text embedding, I trained this model on a collection of fields from the database. In data science, these kinds of attributes are called features. It's important to note here that features must be encoded as numbers. But you can use the relatively new JSON make array function. I think that was in the last version, previous release. The JSON make array function will help you create these feature arrays. So let's see how to do that. I think that's in the data viewer. Sweet. So here, I've taken my 4 attributes, my 4 fields that I want to train the model on, put them into a list, pass that list to the JSON make array function, join it on the return character, and then I've defined these values to be of type number. And then I'm just returning it. Voila, we have a features array. So one of the things you'll notice here is I'm only using 4 features. The ChatGPT vector embedding has thousands of these. How am I getting away with doing it with 4? Well, our model isn't a general purpose model, is it? We've trained it on our own data, and so we only need a handful of these features to make all this work. So let's go ahead and predict some GPAs. So we've got a student here, perfect attendance, studies all day, somehow finds time to sneak in a music program. So taking these 4 values, created our features array here. We're going to pass that to predict from model. And we can predict 3.73 GPA, so not bad. Good job, dude. Here we've got a problem. This kid doesn't show up, doesn't study, can't be bothered with anything, apparently. And so we've got our features array for those values here. We're going to predict from model on that. And as you might expect, we have a 1.3 GPA, which is pretty terrible. But wait, we trained this model. This is our data. And so what if I go in here, take care of some of these absences, get his attendance up, put this kid in a library on occasion. So now we've got a new features array, updated values. I'm going to pass this to our model that we trained. And now we're coming back with a more respectable 3.2. Good job. All right. So when you look at the configure regression model step, it can be easy to think that it only works with text embeddings, right? I mean, the way some of the parameters are labeled, the way the language in the soon-to-be documentation talks about vector embeddings a lot. And so it's easy to think that it only works with text embeddings. And text embeddings are fine. It does work that way. But you can absolutely train a model on any array of values. I'm going to say that again, any array of values. So as long as you can represent them as numbers. And that's not immediately obvious here, but this is a really big deal. So hopefully, I've got your wheels turning a little bit now, and you're starting to see how powerful this feature is. Shout out to Claris for providing it. Thank you. Because now, instead of just using FileMaker to collect, summarize, and present our data, we can train a model and use it to make predictions about data we don't already have. And y'all are smart. I'm going to predict that you'll find lots of places to use this like I have. Got some resources here for those who want to dive a little deeper. You can fine-tune a random forest. You can limit the number of trees, the number of splits, and some other parameters. There are tools that will help you clean up and prepare your data to make your predictions more accurate, which you don't have to do, but it can help. If you want to get your predictions up to well north of 90%, you may need to do some fine-tuning. If you have any questions about any of these tools, feel free to chat me up at lunch, and I will talk your ear off about it. And with that, I thank you for your attention. Like and subscribe. Smash the like button.
All right, any questions for Brian?
I've actually got a question for myself. Self? I mentioned earlier about creating a features array and that they all have to be numeric values. And so what you might be wondering is, well, a lot of my FileMaker data is not numeric, right? And so how would I turn those into numbers? And so some of those mappings are going to be really easy, right? You've got, true false values, checkbox sets. You can easily map true and false to 1 and 0. But what if you've got like a values list to create a drop-down menu or something? Those values might be in a related table, so they have keys, right? If your keys are numeric, you can just use the key as part of your features array. That's not going to be helpful if you're using UUIDs for record IDs, but I just wanted to point out that as you go to create your vectors and your features array, if you're searching for a way to make numbers out of these values, that don't overcomplicate it. If you've got record IDs that are numeric already, go ahead and use those. It doesn't matter what the number is. As long as they are numeric, the random forest and the regression training will figure all that out for you. So, didn't mention that earlier.
So following up on your last comment and what you described, can you explain how, let's say what we are converting to a number value is text. So like the ratings, the app.
Yeah, the review text.
The app review text.
Yeah.
Is that like you would be converting the entire paragraph that they've written into a single number, or would you be taking words within that and converting them to numbers? So like the word love would be part of it. I'm not sure how many matches you would get to a number that is representative of the entire paragraph. I guess that's what I'm
Right. So the first example, the reviews model, was trained on a single field. It was
trained on the ratings that went with those comments.
The review text is just a single field, and so I used the OpenAI. I just used an API call to ChatGPT to create the vector embedding.
Okay.
And because that was a single field that did the training, all the vector embedding that has probably thousands of numbers in it, frankly, that's enough for the model to train on. If you've got other fields, multiple fields, like location information, maybe a list of cities or just anything really. If you need to use multiple attributes to train the model, then you'll need to get maybe a little creative about a mapping table or hash table or something like that to maybe the states start at 1 and go to 1, 2, 3, 4. If you can map it to a record ID that's numeric already, you can absolutely use one of those. True and false is typically 1 and 0.
So for something like state, where what you have is maybe an abbreviation of the state, could you go as simple as like using the FileMaker code function to convert it to a number?
Sure. Actually, that's a good idea. Yeah, you could use, there's probably 3 or 4 functions like that will help you reduce something like that down to a numeric value. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.